Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's P&G Alumni Network Enrichment Series webinars. This is your host, Ileana Rojas, and I hope you're all safe and well. And I'm very excited for our guest today, Melanie Healey, who will share with us her 8-part framework on how to lead during turbulent times. So now, without further ado, let me introduce you to Mel Healey. Mel, thank you so much for being with us today. And the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. And Ileana, thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you all. Happy International Women's Week. It's an honor to be kicking off this big week with you all today. Those of you who know me know that I'm a big, huge believer in diversity and, most importantly, making people feel included and valued at work. And it's great to see P&G placing such an importance on this, both at the company level and, of course, at the Alumni Foundation level as well, with all that Ileana does. I hope you're all in good health and staying safe and wearing your masks. And what a year this has been. Who would have thought this time last year that we would be where we are still? And we would have had the kind of year we had in 2020 and are still having in 2021. I'm sure every single one of us have had our fair share of stories to tell this past year, both good and bad, and that's what leads us to our topic of conversation today: what makes leaders strong and effective and inspiring during transformative times. And I thought I'd share an 8-part framework for leading during turbulent times. And I'm sure many of you would probably look at this framework and say to yourselves, I've seen this before. I hope what will make this framework interesting to you will be some of the stories that I'll tell behind each of the steps. But before we get started on the framework, a little bit of humor, maybe the next slide, Ileana, always goes a long way. So I found these cartoons. I thought they were fun. The CDC's recommended distance to view today's cartoon. And these are some alternatives to handshakes, hugs, and high fives from around the world. Anyway, I won't dwell long on this, but in times of crisis, humor goes a long way, and that's really the point of the slide. Let's move on. So change is actually one of the constant in our lives, and I know that this COVID year has been a pretty dramatic one. But we get health pandemics more often than we think. We had SARS not long ago. We have political changes, wars, whether they're geographic or ideological. We have economic changes like recessions, hyperinflation, devaluation. Those of you who have lived in places like Latin America know well what those feel like. Disruptive substitutions in industries, whether it's email disrupting fax machines, or mobile phones disrupting landlines, or cable TV disrupting airwaves TV. These are all disruptive changes that end up happening. Netflix disrupting movie theaters, and the key here is making sure that we're really staying in tune to the signs that are kind of coming our way and getting ready for it. Let's go to the next slide. So what I thought I'd tell you guys is a story that sort of has happened in my life. I actually grew up in Brazil, and Brazil was a military dictatorship until 1985. And I can tell you many stories about what it was actually like growing up in a military dictatorship. One story is walking into a supermarket. This is actually one of the reasons I decided to go into marketing. Walking into a supermarket and only finding one brand of shampoo, or one brand of soap, or one brand of detergent. That you didn't get a choice, really. It was a very closed market. There really wasn't much choice. When I came to the States and walked into the supermarket, I was overwhelmed by choice. Another thing was no freedom of speech, no freedom of press. Basically, what you saw in the newspaper was what the government wanted you to see. A lot of protests in the street, often. And so these were just some of the memories that I grew up with in that environment. But the one that really stuck out for me was 1986, coming home from work one day, driving in my car, listening to the radio, and the announcer comes on and he says, "Yep, your currency is no longer called the Cruzeiro. It's now called the Cruzado." It's the equivalent of you being in the US and, you know, your government, now my government too, because I'm an American citizen, saying the dollar is no longer called the dollar, it's called the dollaret. And it's no longer, you know, worth, you know, $1 to, you know, €1. It's now worth $1 is €1 is worth 10 cents. The dollar is 10 cents of a euro. And that was the level of devaluation that happened to that currency that day. It was devalued by 1,000%. It lost 3 zeros basically. It went from 1,000 to 1, and everything got cut by 3 zeros. Your salary, everything. And it was really hard to just understand what the value of your money meant, what you were actually going to make the next day or the next month, or what your salary was going to be, or what your rent was going to be, whether you were even going to be able to afford to pay anything. It was the most disconcerting thing I can recall going through at the time. And I remember I was actually on my way to my parents for dinner that night. And I can remember just showing up, and all we could do was stay glued to the news, just try and understand what was going on. And then showing up to work the next day, I was an assistant brand manager at the time, and showing up the next day, you know, sitting down with my boss and asking him, okay, what do we do now? Like how do we think about price lists? What's the first thing I do sitting down at work? I mean, it was your whole world was turned upside down, not just at work, but personally as well. And just trying to stay focused on what we had to do that day at work, but also stay focused around what it meant for you personally was just a very difficult time for everyone. And that I've always tried to not forget that moment, because every time a crisis has hit since, it's been a defining moment for me, because it has always made me remember that for people on my team or in my organization, it's not just about the disruption it creates for them at work, but also for them personally at home and with their families. And that is what makes you be a human and authentic leader when it comes to these disruptive crises. And so that's just an important, I think, story to just remember. The second thing I'd say here is, and you can see from this slide, is that this currency changed 6 times in the next 6 years. Inflation was double digits a month for the next 6 years, reaching 80% a month in March of 1990. So whatever that is, 4 years later. In that month, the government froze everyone's savings for a full year. So you couldn't access your savings. And as you can imagine, when you finally were able to access your savings, it didn't there wasn't really much savings when inflation was 80% a month. So in essence, they appropriated the people's savings as well. So all that to say that when the first lesson about change is it is a constant, it happens, and you have to very quickly accept it and get over it and move on and take it as a challenge and an opportunity. Let's move to the next slide here. So take all that through sort of 1993. P&G then transfers me to Mexico in 93, and boom, 94, the big Mexico devaluation happened. So change continued happening in my life. And then I moved to Venezuela in 98 when Chavez gets elected. Come to the US in 2001 when 9/11 hits. Moved to the North America business in 2009, just after the big US recession happens. And of course, now we've got the global pandemic. So again, my point is change is always around us. And it's important to always be prepared. So let's go to the framework real quick with that as sort of background. The framework is basically 8 steps. The first one is change is going to happen. So it's important to realize it, to anticipate and prepare. Be prepared so that when change hits, you're ready. Second, protect your institution and your employees. Third, clarify your purpose, rebuild trust and passion. Fourth, pick your team, inspire your new coalition. And I'm going to go into these in detail. Fifth, develop the vision, strategy, culture, tough choices, make the tough choices to win. Fifth, Sixth, communicate broadly and frequently. Seventh, execute swiftly, brilliantly, and deliver extraordinary results. And eighth, invest in your vitality and your team and family's vitality too. So let's go to the first, anticipate and prepare. So the first one is, as I shared with you, crisis happens all the times, and it's our jobs as leaders to be prepared. While we can't always be prepared for the specific crisis, we can be prepared for the generic crisis. Every company should spend the time identifying their top 5 to 10 risks that may happen globally and locally, and ensure they have a crisis response plan with key stakeholders identified, key communicators identified, and a diverse team in place with a well thought out message track and communication plan. Just to give you an idea, the audit committee of every board spends considerable time going through each of these potential risks. So one would hope that the senior leadership teams is also spending some good time thinking through what these scenarios might be as well, and of course, preparing for them. If we're listening carefully to the signs around us, we can often anticipate a crisis on the horizon. I think it's fair to say that we probably could have anticipated the COVID crisis earlier than we did if we had seen the signs coming earlier. I can tell you that as an example, the 2008 crisis in the US, my husband and I, because we had seen these types of crises come many times in our life in Brazil, we actually could see the signs coming and were able to remove all of our money from the stock market before the crisis hit, just as an example. There were signs that were happening in the stock market, that were happening in the economy, that we could just see this. We'd seen this story before. And so keep your eyes open, watch for the signs. And it's not to say be a pessimist, it's to say be a realist. face the crisis, face reality, and get your ducks in a row, anticipate it, prepare, and you will be better off than your competition because you were ready and you had your team in place and you had your plan, and you will be much more successful than the guy next, or the person next to you. Next one. Protecting the institution, your employees, and your customers. So let's start first with protecting the institution. Obviously, at a time when crisis hits, liquidity is everything. Being able to pay your employees, pay your bills, pay your customers is really what job one is all about. So maximizing your cash position, optimizing your financial structure, making sure that you're aggressively managing your working capital, reducing your costs, reining in planned investments, selling assets. Those are sort of those critical first financial steps that you need to take to protect the institution. And there are many more, but won't go into that. On your people, it's really important to connect with your team quickly and give them hope. Be empathetic to their needs very quickly as well. Remember the story that I told right at the beginning around, their fears. Help them overcome those fears. Get them focused. Empathize with them. Engage with them. Motivate them quickly. Enable them to get back to their norms. Provide, in this case with COVID, provide them with the conditions to be able to work from home. Give them masks. I think P&G, for example, did a great job of quickly being able to produce masks themselves when masks couldn't be had. Communication, give them the means of communication, education with technology so that they can work from home in this particular case. But in essence, enable them to be able to get back to norms quickly. And for customers, very quickly understand the major habits that will evolve that are likely in this new environment that they're now going to be facing, and just being genuinely curious about what these might be and why they will be important. Challenge whatever assumptions you may have had about them, and what you thought you knew about your customers before and after the crisis hits. The agility in adapting to their needs and meeting their needs faster and better than your competitor will help you win their hearts, mind, and loyalty faster than any competitor out there, and that will set you up to quickly gain market share. And that's what the name of the game is in a crisis. It's going to be market share. It's not necessarily going to be increased revenue at a time when wallets are tight, but increased market share will set you up to be better off when the crisis ends. So ask questions, be curious, keep learning. That's going to be very important during a crisis. Third, next slide. Clarify your purpose. Your purpose will never go away, and rebuild a culture of trust and passion in your organization. So I think no better person in the world really than Martin Luther King, who had such an inspirational and clear purpose that never went away, no matter what the crisis was around him. In his dream of, I have a dream for my 4 little children who will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their characters. That stood with him everywhere he went. How many times have we all heard that speech? It still stands with him, even way past his death. It lives on. It's a dream by many of his followers today, and that's important. Do you have a dream for your business and for your people that will live on and survive any crisis. That when the crisis hits, you can remind people that that is your purpose and that that purpose will never go away. That you can stand up in front of your organization when a crisis hits and remind people that that's why you are here. It is to bring that purpose to life. And then, of course, leverage that purpose to rebuild that culture of trust and passion, because when a crisis hits, trust gets eroded, passion dies a little bit. And that purpose is what helps you come back and rebuild that culture of trust and passion. I remember when the crisis did hit, and you know, we had a lot of trouble getting the North America business back to growth in the U.S. P&G, and we had a particularly difficult year one year, and trust had eroded. And I got my North America leadership team together, and we came up we asked ourselves, okay, when we were at our best, what was it about our culture as a team that really made us perform at our best? And we came up with the 7 habits of winning. And the 7 habits were: courageous leaders, brilliant executors, trusting and transparent team players, crisis-like collaborators, shameless reappliers, agile and smart risk takers, and disciplined, clear, and on our principles and values as a company. And so we created these thank you cards that had those 7 habits to win on them. And we, at every town hall, we created prizes for people who exemplified those habits. And we used those habits. We obviously did our best to role model as many of these habits as we could to the organization, because those behaviors started at the top. But that was the culture that we wanted the organization to embrace. That was the culture we wanted to rebuild in the organization. And we made it very intentional for people. So it takes work to rebuild a culture of trust and passion. And that's just one example of how we did it in North America. And one of the habits that I just wanted to touch on here, this crisis-like collaborators, you know, that's an important one in these crisis situations. Ileana and I were talking about this earlier. You know, it's a collaboration is often something that happens in these crises, and it's an important habit. It's a survival-like instinct that sort of kicks in, and you want strong crisis-like collaboration happening in your organization. So that's just something to think about. Next slide, please. Number 4. Picking your team as if you're casting for a play, I call it, and then of course inspire them to action. You know, the team that got you to the point where you are today might not be the team that's going to get you to where you need to go after the crisis, once a crisis hits. And you know, depending on the industry you're in, you might have to make some tough choices. You know, if you're in a hotel industry, you might have to cut back your team significantly, just because hotel occupancy is, you know, down to 10% versus 90% before the crisis, and you can't afford to keep your entire team. So you're going to have to pick who stays. And then, of course, you know, inspire those people who stay to action. And I always say that, you know, it's important that you're very intentional about picking who stays. You know, Jack Nicholson would not have made a good pilot in Top Gun, And Tom Cruise would not have made a good protagonist in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? So really making sure that now they're both good actors in their own rights, but making sure you pick the right person for those roles is very critical. So pick your team as if casting for a play and inspiring them to action. Next slide, please. Obviously, things have changed when a crisis hits, and you're going to have to revisit your vision, your critical strategies, your critical metrics, your choices, and hopefully you've already revisited your culture, as we talked earlier, and then of course role modeling your desired culture. So this slide just re-emphasizes the importance of doing that and making intentional choices that help you act with a level of intentionality and agility that just helps you move quicker once the crisis hits, and not necessarily assume that the strategies that you were working on before will work as well as they would have in the new environment that you're now operating in. Next slide, please. Communication. Gosh, this is one where we often don't give it enough importance, but communicate. I'll just, one of the boards that I sit on, Verizon, we have a CEO, a guy called Hans Vestberg. He is the master communicator. Oh my goodness. What an amazing job he has done. He has used YouTube in a masterful way. In fact, if you Google him on YouTube, you will see in many of his communications to his employees, because they're public. Anyone can Google them. Obviously, he keeps them very generic, but that's how open he is. He has lunchtime meetings, I think once a week. He invites his board members to speak. He's been absolutely masterful at leveraging people to educate his employees. Everything is, of course, done over Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. But he has been incredible about enabling his team to stay in touch, to be educated, and to maintain a great open channel of communication with his team. So my point is, even in a time where you can't be face to face, there are so many ways that you can stay in touch with your team and leverage the internet and all these open communication channels now to keep a frequent beat of communication and stay in touch and be visible and communicate frequently and often, and keep your vision and your mission and your strategies alive for all your stakeholders, your employees, your customers, your investors, your board, doesn't matter. Lots of ways to do it. Next, execution. Again, agility is critical. So executing swiftly, brilliantly, and delivering extraordinary results. Once you come out with whatever your new critical success metrics are, make sure you deliver on them. In some cases, obviously in the hotel industry, these critical success metrics were a lot lower than they were prior to COVID, but it was important that the team delivered on them. In other cases, they were a lot higher than they were pre-COVID. It was important that the team delivered on those too. So whatever they are, however you adjust them, it's important that you then deliver on them and deliver extraordinarily well against them, because that's what ends up rebuilding the trust with your stakeholders, and that's what it's all about. So make sure you understand this is the toughest part of any plan to rebuild a successful business. It's the toughest part because it requires an intimate understanding of your consumer and your customer and your stakeholders in general. It requires an understanding of their needs, their wants, their desires, a full understanding of the distribution channels, and of course, pricing and competitive dynamics. So spend the time to understand that, but do it quickly and well and efficiently, and then execute well against them. And last but not least, food, sleep, exercise. Take care of yourselves, invest in yourselves and in your family and in your team's vitality. Take the time to have some fun, laugh a little, bring some enjoyment, enthusiasm, and humor to work and to home. Do a virtual happy hour with your team. Join a book club together with your team. Watch a TED Talk together. Don't miss the opportunity to bond just because you can't physically be together. Enjoy that quality time with your family, your partner, your kids, and your team. It's important. I can give you examples. I'm a member of a number of women groups here in Cincinnati. We have one that I created, actually. It's a group of women board members, public board members, or just for-profit board members here in Cincinnati. And the goal of the group was just to get together and learn from each other, and also help women get on boards here in Cincinnati, women who are qualified to get on public boards, and get to know them and begin recommending them for boards. And when COVID hit, obviously we weren't able to physically get together. So we created a Zoom call, and we do this once a month, once every couple of months. We pick a topic and we do it via Zoom with a glass of wine instead. So is it perfect? No, but we've gotten to know each other. We still meet the goal, and it's fun. And we were doing it every 3 months, and the group is having so much fun that they've asked to do it every month now. So now we're going to do it yet once a month. So anyway, my point is, it works. You can do it, and it's just a question of making it a choice. And with that, that is the framework. I want to just thank you all for your time, for the patience. Hopefully, this has been helpful, and I'd like to open it up to Q&A now, and then we can end with one last slide. Maybe Ileana, we'll leave 1 minute at the end to cover my last slide on the foundation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mel, so much for sharing your framework. I think, to your point, crisis is something that we've lived throughout, many throughout our lives, but I think now more than ever, it's something that we're all, no matter where we are in the world, living together. We're having a lot of questions come in, so I'll go through them. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the questions side of the control panel, and I'll make sure to share them. And going to the first question, can you tell us about your purpose? You were talking about purpose being important. Can you tell us about your purpose and how it's transformed your career?
Sure. Well, one of my purposes has been one constant purpose in my life has been to mentor women to enable and help them reach higher levels in the organization. And at this point in my life, it's really been to kind of help more of them get on boards. It's what I can obviously control, and And that's one of the reasons why I have created this group in Cincinnati called Corporate Women's, the Cincinnati Corporate Women's Directors. And basically it is 4 women directors in Cincinnati, but we all get to bring a +1. So we each get to identify one other woman who we think is ready to get on the board. And then once they get on the board, they get to join the group, and they get to now invite another woman. And once your woman has joined the group, you now get to invite a second woman. So the group started as 15 women. We're now up to 30. So we've already added 15 women to boards. And so you can see the multiplying effect of that. So that's, my purpose, obviously, while I was at P&G was, again, to get more women into senior management, but obviously prepare them, get them ready for the roles, and move them up, advocate for them, because we have a gap. That's the bottom line. We have a gap. We have to fill it. A lot of that gap is driven by unconscious biases. It's not a gap that is there because women are not capable. It's a gap that's there because the bias is there, and that's we need advocates to get rid of that, and that's I feel that's been my purpose. It's what's driven me most of my life, and there you have it.
Thank you. And I think that's really important to share as an example. Earlier, before we started the webinar, we were also talking about how the crisis has driven more women out of the workforce than men. I've seen several articles early this year coming with those numbers, and how important it is for leaders to provide the space and the environments to both bring women back, help them to come back to the workforce, and then increase that leadership pipeline. So I think your example is a great example of things that the leaders can do to continue to help, knowing that this is Women's Month. I think it's having that sense of the importance of supporting women to grow and be able to accomplish that diversity throughout the workforce. So thank you for sharing that example. You talked about your number 1 or number 2, I can't remember, being prepared, and how important that is, and being able to see the signs. But in the end, we might have missed them. So one of the questions is, what if you missed the crisis and were not prepared, or missed the signs and were not prepared? What is a course of action then at the beginning of a crisis? Like, it's already hit, you weren't prepared. Now what?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think now what is face reality fast. Just don't, I think one of the things that we often see is denial. And that's the worst thing you can do as a leader, is just deny it. It's not here, it hasn't happened, I don't believe it. Those are the behaviors that you just cannot afford to have as a leader, because very often the rest of the organization, the people under you, see it loud and clearly. And so to have you as a leader not see it or deny it, it's just, it doesn't bode well. So job 1 of every leader has to be to face reality quickly, and to be the first to say it's here, and it's up to us to work quickly and diligently in facing the reality. And that is the critical thing that you have to do if you have missed the earlier warning signs. So I think that's the key. And once you start facing reality, then it's almost like plotting the business case, assessing the landscape. It's the same sort of exercise that you would do when faced with a competitive threat. assess the landscape. It's what exactly is happening. Let's just understand the situation. It's like a situation room. And what does it mean to your business? What does it mean to your customers, to all your stakeholders, customers, employees, shareholders, financial community, liquidity, all the implications basically to your business, and then how you're going to deal with it, how you're going to communicate it, what's going to be your message tracks. What teams are you going to put in place to deal with each one of the issues? So those, just face reality, be objective, don't let emotions get in the way. Those are the types of things.
Thank you. Continuing with the theme of women and considering it's Women's Month, mentoring has been identified as one of those big opportunities that could make a difference in women growing in their leadership career. So we have a question of who mentored you and helped you be prepared, if anybody, and what was the one lesson they gave you that has stayed with you?
Good question. I had a lot of great mentors throughout my career. I didn't really have one mentor throughout, just a lot of great ones. Having moved around so many times in my career, I guess it was difficult to have one mentor. And I'm a big believer in having mentors that are sort of generally in the same geographic area. I think it's easier. I guess one person who kind of stuck out for me early on in my career was a woman called Martha Miller. She was one of the general managers in Mexico. So having grown up in Latin America, she was someone that I sort of watched early on in my career. And she was just a wonderful lady. She always acted with such grace. And she had two young kids at the time. So she had a family, and so she was just someone I watched because I, at the time, aspired to have a family as well. I didn't have one yet, but then of course I moved to Mexico, and had the opportunity to meet her for the first time and talk to her. And she was basically at that point in time kind of retiring. And just listen, I got to listen to a lot of the stories from her about how she dealt with certain family situations while working. And those were the stories I wanted to hear, quite frankly, because that's, I think, for a lot of women, I think that's the things that we deal with most, the things we struggle with most, especially when you're sort of growing up in your career and you're just first learning. And at the time in Mexico, I had two young kids. One was 2, the other was 3 months old. So they were both born there. And, I was just struggling with managing it all. And I think one of the tips that Martha gave me at the time was, just be very clear with your limits. Just be very clear in communicating what you will and will not do with your bosses. And I remember the first time I actually did that was with Pedro Medina, who I loved. He was a great boss, and he was always known to be quite a slave driver at the time. I'm sure he's softened up since, but I remember coming back from my first maternity leave, and it was the first time I was going to work for him. And he said, he came to my office and he said, okay, Mel, I just wanted you to know, these are the 4 or 5 things that I want you to do, this and this and this and this. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's a lot. I've just come home back from maternity leave. I could just see this was not going to work. And I remember Martha's advice to make sure you communicate your limits. And so I said to him, I said, Pedro, that's fine, but I just want you to know 2 things about how this is going to work. I will deliver on every single one of your 5 objectives that you've just given me. But you have to remember 2 things about the way we're going to work together. Number 1, at 6 o'clock, I drop my pen and I leave and I go home. I only live 5 minutes away, so that was easy for me to leave at 6 and pretty much be home by 6. 6 o'clock, I drop my pen. He used to work till 7 or 8, so that was not going to work for me. And number 2, the meeting cannot go on without me. So if I drop my pen at 6, you need to drop your pen at 6 as well, at least where my meetings are concerned. Is that fair? And I remember him looking at me going, okay, that's fair. And to his credit, he dropped his pen at 6 every time I dropped my pen at 6. And we went on to have the best boss-subordinate relationship, the most respectful boss-subordinate relationship, to the point that years later, when he was at Danone, I think he flew me to Paris 3 or 4 times to get me to go work at Danone. Now, I didn't because I was quite happy at P&G, but I certainly enjoyed my trips to Paris. Point being, that was a great tip from Martha to be clear about your limits when you come back to work.
That is so powerful. And I think you're right. That's something that many people, not only women, I think we struggle to say those limits because we're afraid that, there's going to be repercussions or it's going to impact our career. So great advice. Thank you for sharing. We have time for one more quick question. All of your framework are great leadership lessons, not only for turbulent times, just like in general, but is there one that definitely you feel, especially in the crisis that we're living right now, that is like the most important one to keep in mind?
Let me go back to my framework here. I would say, I think one. It's always difficult to pick one. Choices, the toughest one, right? I think probably one that is really important to do, crisis or no crisis, is clarify your purpose. Because if that is clear, when a crisis does hit, it will serve you really well. It's very difficult in the midst of a crisis to come up with a purpose. But if you already have one, your agility in getting back to business, in a way that is, quick, in an agile but strong way, is going to be, you're going to be better off if your purpose is clear than if your purpose is not.
Yes, completely agree. And I think it's becoming more and more evident when organizations have a clear purpose, they're inspiring people just to go through any challenge versus those that it's not necessarily clear. Thank you. Great advice. And I just want to, before we move on to the last slide of your presentation, I just wanted to share a lot of comments in the chat of people that you've touched dearly throughout, that have received notes from you or sound advice, and how they're saying thank you to you for the impact that you've done in their lives and in their careers. So again, that is a great evidence of not only how others have impacted you, but the impact that you've had on others. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
So do you want to talk about Happy International Women's Day?
So I just wanted to just appeal here to the group, because it's International Women's Day sort of kickoff, or month really kickoff, and for the first time, the P&G Alumni Foundation is creating an International Women's Day grant challenge with a $25,000 grant match component. And I don't know how many of you already donate to the P&G Alumni Foundation. I do. I've donated for a couple of years, and a rather big amount. It's one of my major donation organizations that I donate to. And it's just one more good reason why donating to this foundation can really make a difference to people's lives. This foundation is focused on helping those in need to achieve greater financial independence and economic well-being for themselves, their families, and their communities. And it's a great way for P&Gers to get involved around the world. It's a foundation that has global reach, and they support local charities whose mission it is to help individuals to gain economic independence for them and their families. And it's an opportunity for P&Gers to get involved with these local charities and help these local charities have access to funds to do better. So anyway, I just wanted to put in a plug for these guys. They do some amazing work. We have an awesome CEO of the foundation called Deb Kilty, and or she actually is the chair of the foundation, I believe, and she is a super person, a good friend of mine. Anyway, I just wanted to say I'm personally very passionate about this foundation. We have a lot of great P&Gers who already give. And if we have, I believe we have probably 250 people on this call. And if everyone gives a little, the dollars get matched by this 25,000 grant match component. Your dollars will go an extra bit as well. And it's a good cause. So there you go. Just wanted to put a plug in. It's a good cause, and just wanted to thank you all for supporting this talk today, and again wish everyone an awesome March and a safe exit from COVID, hopefully by no later than the summer, when we can all get out and socialize again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mel, so much. We really appreciate comments keep coming in of thank you. So thank you for the time this morning. Very inspiring, everything that you had to share with us. A couple of final announcements before we leave. Our webinars are recorded, so if you want to watch this webinar again, it will be available in our P&G alumni website. So make sure that you sign up for updates at pngalums.com, where you'll be able to see this webinar and all the past ones where we've had wonderful speakers. Like Mel said, support the foundation. It's a great initiative that we're having for this month, so don't miss out on that opportunity. Partner with us at sponsor@pngalums.com and volunteer, join a chapter, or share any other thoughts that you have, and send us an email at hello@pngalums.com. The webinars will also be available after a while in our YouTube page, so you can also subscribe there and watch the webinars after they come out in our website there. And finally, like I said, any thoughts, any questions, any other things that you'd like to share, please send us an email at hello@pngalums.com. And I invite you to join us next month with Phil Duncan, the Chief Design Officer of Procter Gamble. Thank you very much for being with us today, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you so much.